What's going on? Here in the Beat Sessions, the place for all things music, and where we do the listening for you. I'm your host, Mitchell Weary. Let's talk about Queens of the Stone Age and this new record, In Times New Roman. They released that on June 16th. This is studio album number 8 for the band, and their follow up to 2017's Villains, a record that I think we can all agree was really fun, grounded in their signature sound, but produced by Mark Ronson. So I'd argue it's the most pop driven affair that they've released to date. I love the influence of glam rock. There was lots of Bowie, lots of T-Rex on that record. And the electronic element is fantastic. It's an album that you can dance to. And Josh Homme's talked about that. He is super into electronic music. He wants you to hear that in their rock and roll. He wants you to be able to go to a Queen show and dance. And so I love the influence of that record. And I like the prior two records, Era Vulgaris and Like Clockwork. Era Vulgaris, the electronic element came at you 100 miles an hour. That record's really intense, and I love it for that reason. Like Clockwork seemed more experimental, seemed a little more proggy as far as those electronics. I just feel like the trajectory of this band, when I listened to In Times New Roman, I'd argue that this is not the record that I think most of us thought that we were going to get next, but that's okay. I think it's an excellent thing. I've loved reading reviews, thoughts on this album, watching some reviews recently. There's quite a few different opinions on this thing. And I would first of all argue that this is a band that doesn't make bad records. I think Josh Homme is one of the last great rock and roll frontmen that is out there. He is fantastic. And so it's fun to rank their records. It's fun to have that discussion to see where people's thoughts are. When it comes to this band, it's all about my mood. And that's what I love about their albums, is that depending on how I'm feeling, I have different records that I'll go to. And so for In Times New Roman, you're probably going to be in a darker mood for this one. This album is about catharsis. For a band that has always tried to be really innovative on all of their records, I feel, this album, it's not one of the primary objectives. And I think that's okay. This record is about catharsis. This is about a major reckoning that Josh Homme's having with the world and with himself, frankly. We've all had a pretty rough go the last 3 or 4 years or so. Josh has had arguably a tougher go than most people. Some really tragic deaths, close friends, a nasty divorce that became very public, and a lot of stuff that he will admit is on him, and he's taken accountability for that. I love reading the interviews. And this record, a lot of people say it's the most personal affair that they've put out to date, and I think you can make that argument. But he talks about it. He's like not going to explicitly write a song about his ex-wife, but he talks about working through the process of all that grief and how these songs were a part of getting through that process and finding himself on the other side. So, he'll be the first to admit that this record is about acceptance. It's about all those things coming at you 100 miles an hour and having to deal with them. You really don't have an option. It's either capitulate and life is over, or, you can fight through and get to the other side and realize that, you're going to have moments like that, but life is still a beautiful thing. Loving Josh on this record. This record, intense rock and roll feel. I just love dialing into I'm hearing a signature sound of the Stooges a ton on this thing. Hear Alice Cooper, hear Deep Purple. I just hear hard blues driven rock for the most part. Now there's a little bit of, some electronic elements that work here on this. I'm hearing a lot of people compare this thing to Era Vulgaris though, and I just don't agree with that necessarily. The second song on that record, Sick, 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 I think is, the song on more than any other song on that record that reflects what is going on in Times New Roman. So, check that song out. I think that that'll give you an idea of what's going on this record, but it's fun. It's heavy. It's intense. It's honest and brutal, but also cathartic, like I said. And you get to the very end, and especially we'll talk about the last track, but the coda on that song, it's this moment where, the final track just kind of floats out and it feels like you've found peace after sorting through all of this chaos and all of this torture. It's a really well put together record. I'm not going to argue that it's the best Queens of the Stone Age album to date. I'll argue it's better than Villains though. I liked this album better than Villains. For as fun and playful as Villains is, I think there's some moments where it kind of falls flat for that reason. For what it's trying to do, I just think it comes up short at moments. It's only 9 songs, kind of a short affair there. So I like the 10-track run on this thing, 48 minutes. It's it's a pretty darn good record that I'm very pleased with. And most of the people that I've, been reading their thoughts on are pleased with it as well. It's going to kick off with Obscenery. The wordplay, by the way, it's always there with Josh Homme. Really loving the wordplay lyrically in this throughout the record, though. Obscenery, great building with guitars to open on this thing. It's got this loose feel that I really like the way that it still finds this driving tempo. And this opening track, this is an example of throw some headphones on, drop the needle on that wax, and just listen to the playful production. It's really cool. Very well done. Really like the way the guitars become more fierce in the chorus on this thing, along with the falsetto vocal. And there's this excellent bridge. There's these frenzied strings that work in. The song just becomes all about that. And then you get right back into this rock and feel. There's this voyeurism jism is a line that's in this song that kind of caught my attention on the first listen. And, again, talk about that wordplay. I think he's so good at that. There's this element of his character, his persona, that he's always had it's kind of this cartoonish villain that he portrays. It's his rock and roll persona. And what I think is cool about this record is that he lets that veil down just a tiny bit. You get to see a little more personal side of him. It's not quite as humorous, but there's still plenty of that element going on, as we just read there. Your second song, Paper Machete, pretty biting. I love this track. And I love talking about the Stooges. Love the driving feel of this song. Right to Work. It's got this garage rock feel, channeling the Stooges, the bass riff especially. And there's this moment about halfway through the song where it's just the percussion and that driving bass riff. Mikey Shoes just performing his ass off on this thing. He's incredible on this record. Obviously, I'm so biased, but I think his bass work is extraordinary on this record. And the way that he just carries that lick and lets that loose guitar solo just kind of like rock and grind over the riff is incredible. And I just could not help but hear, like Funhouse or self-titled record. A lot of that going on there. Lyrics really biting here. Dig that element of the song. Negative Space is your third track. Big chunky rocker. Lots of fuzz in the bass on this song. Percussion is rollicking and playful. It's an interesting dynamic. You get heavy guitars, but then playful percussion. Really cool part of the track. The sparseness of the guitar textures that work in and out is pretty cool. I love the full texture of the melody in the chorus as well. Big soaring guitar that works in the background when that's happening. It's a fun track. Time and Place is your fourth song. Loose blues-inspired riff. But I love the way that this thing opens up the track, and then it's like out of right field, you just get this 80s new wave Talking Head style of funky rock track. It's so groovy. It's such a great dynamic to open up this song, and I love the feel that it carries. Got this cool little jam that it breaks into in the middle of the track. But yeah, Talking Heads, I'd say, is the biggest influence that I felt on that track. Fun dynamic there. Made to Parade is your fifth song. It's got that signature jaunty feel that you get in Queens of the Stone Age. I love that. Smooth groove in the bass on this song. And there's this, I love the line, I did not notice the weight of the chains until they were cut from me. Pretty solid lyricism there from Josh. Going to lead into your sixth song, Carnivore. This song title and the next one are my two favorites. Love the ominous feedback to open this thing up. Ushers in the vocal and the drum. The verse is going to have sparse guitars as this thing, builds. A little bit of bass that works in as well. And then the chorus. I love the contrast here. It works in. It's got this breezy new wave feel. I love the way that this just the groove of the track catches coming off of this thing. It's got an interesting outro as well. But yeah, that it's from verse to chorus. I'm loving that dynamic there. And like I said, those breezy choruses are really nice on that track. Your seventh song, What the Peephole Say. Peephole, not people. Funny play on words there, in my opinion, right into this dance punk feel. It's got this probably the most different feel of any song on the record, and harkening back to the sound I think that the last three records played with the most. But the bass, definitely a highlight here. I love the different segments of this song and the way that it's working through all those, kind of a spooky backing vocal. And it's something that the back end of this record takes on. The first part of the album just feels intense and angry. The second half just gets kind of dark and spooky. And it's going to lead into Sicily, your eighth track, which is probably my favorite, and it's definitely the spookiest track on the record. Cowbell and finger snaps to open this thing up. Got this smooth bass that works in with the vocal, and then playful guitars. And it's just, this thing is just eerie. It just kind of gives me the creeps, but I love this mellow breakdown the rollicking bass that's in the middle driving that thing. It's very playful. And this thing borders on psychedelic as well. There's a lot going on. It's a really fun track. Emotion Sickness is your ninth song, your penultimate track. Leads off with this person humming, and it sounds like they're walking into a room. I dig the production here. The humming kind of takes over and it ushers in the song. It's a really cool thing. Got a pretty groovy track here as well. I love the feel of it. Just a nice rock and roll feel. The chorus, once that hits though, getting kind of this spacey Steve Miller vibe. And I love that element. There's like all these proggy textures on a number of these songs on the back end of this record. I dig the big drums in the second verse, and Baby Don't Care For Me. That line coming on the back end of the record, it feels more like acceptance versus frustration and anger. If he dropped that line on a song in the beginning of the record, I'd say he's probably in that process of still being pissed. Because I've been there. It sucks when you just, you break up with someone and there's not even sadness. It's like things just go south so bad that you're just flat out angry. It's unfortunate when that happens. But I feel like this line in this song at this point in the record definitely reflects more of an acceptance of the situation. I like the way that's done. And then Straight Jacket Fitting, your final track, big old jam. You're going to get the... I really like the way that it opens up really big, but then it backs off into this like loose, jaunty jam. And then you get this barroom blues feel that takes over about 2.5 minutes in. Just think of the Doors, Roadhouse Blues. That's going to rock for like a minute and a half. Then about 4 minutes in, the music just sort of drops out and these strings build in along with this vocal, gets kind of frenzied. It's a really cool element for 30 seconds. And then the music hits back. And I love, as I mentioned, the last 2 minutes of this song, it becomes a completely different track. The music drops out and then you get this acoustic guitar and string arrangement that is very peaceful. And it's almost like after working through all of the demons for 10 songs, you get this final couple of minutes to take a deep breath, to reflect, and to say, hey man, like that was a hell of a hike. Let's move forward into life. We've done it and we know that we can do it again. And I dig that feeling about this record. Again, I don't know where this ranks as far as the hierarchy of Queens of the Stone Age records. I will argue again that I think it's a better record than Villains. And I dig the energy. I dig Josh being more honest, dealing with a lot of stuff that we've all had to deal with. So I like that element of familiarity as far as his angst, but also a number of things that he personally just had to work through. Some stuff that, some stuff that, I definitely identified with. I think it's a great record. I think it's going to hit in a number of ways, and it might not be your favorite Queens of the Stone Age record ever, but you're going to find times to throw it on, and it's going to feel really appropriate, and it's going to feel like the right record. So hope you enjoy this album. Hope you enjoy this review. Please like this video and share it. Subscribe to the channel. Do all the things to help us blow this project up in 2023, and stay tuned throughout the week for more album reviews. We'll see you next time on the Beat Sessions.